Abbasi Khalifa, Harun al-Rashid and al-Rashid Park in Al-Raqqa city, in addition to burning other statues and crosses in 2 churches, causing outrage among the citizens of the city. Grand Mufti of the Republic Ahmad Badruddin Hassoun stressed the importance of the role of the youth in building Syria, adding that rebuilding what has been destroyed during the current crisis is a heavy responsibility that needs the determination and the strength of the youth. In an open meeting with the students of Syrian University in Latakia, Hassoun called on the Syrian youth to read the history of their homeland and to be committed to their national identity. The flow of jihadists entering Syria has accelerated, and non-Syrians have begun taking the lead in a variety of roles as Al-Qaeda-affiliated Islamic State of Iraq and Syria attempts to assert control over large areas in northern Syria, with Washington Post newspaper reported. The Daily said that foreign fighters man checkpoints, serve as commanders on the battlefield, and have become the de facto rulers of towns and cities in area under rebel control, giving them a visible and much feared presence across large swaths of territory. Units of the armed forces carried out operations against terrorist dens and gatherings in several areas of Daraa and its countryside, inflicting heavy losses upon them. A military source said that the army unit killed many terrorists in the villages and towns of Daraa al-Balad, Enkhil, Busra Sham, and Nawa, in addition to destroying the weapons and ammunition. Units of the Syrian Arab Army clashed with unarmed terrorist groups members who were attempting to attack citizens of Kafrana village and destroyed the weapons and ammunition in several villages, towns, and neighborhoods in Homs. A military source said that the army units killed all members of 2 armed terrorist groups, including a sniper in Al-Qusur neighborhood, in addition to destroying the gatherings in Al-Qarabiz and Babhud neighborhoods. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the Central Bank of Syria, CBS, intends to hold a session of the intervention next Monday to sell $10 million to banks and currency exchange companies for non-commercial purposes, according to a statement issued by the CBS. The statement said the bank will continue to fund the imports of the private sector at a price range between 169.5 and 172.5 Syrian pounds per dollar. And that's the end of the news for tonight. Thank you for kindly listening.
Damascus Radio presents News and Views.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Some of those who call themselves opposition have been dreaming of reaching power and authority in Syria on top of the US tanks over the Syrian people's skeletons. This has been openly revealed as soon as the possibility of the US aggression against Syria backed off, an aggression that the five-star Western-backed aggression, actually, or opposition, have been urgently demanding. So many of those trivial personalities of the so-called opposition have openly expressed disappointment and regret over the U.S. backing off of the aggression in Syria, going as far as criticizing the U.S. stand for not taking action. Apart from this psychopath that hit the so-called opposition, which placed it outside any time or calculations, there is a very reasonable and important question to be asked here, namely, how could such an opposition imagine that it can have a role in the Syrian state at a time they have been calling for the U.S. aggression against Syria? Isn't that in full line with what the Israeli enemy wants? It seems that those people never read or learn from history, not even the near history of such states like Iraq, Libya, or Tunisia. As Syrians, we say to all those that the Syrians can never shake hands with anyone who collaborated with Syria's enemies or whose hands have been stained with Syrian blood, whether directly or indirectly.
That was News and Views from Damascus Radio. Damascus Radio presents Syrian Local Press Review.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Syrian newspapers published today highlighted the following headlines and items of news. Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists killed in continued army operations. Army unit inflict heavy losses upon terrorists in Daraa and its countryside. Army unit eliminate terrorists in Homs and its countryside for the attempt to attack Kafranan village. Parliament discusses citizens' needs, measures to elevate crisis impact. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe calls for solving the crisis in Syria peacefully. Media Workshop recommends a strategy to enhance national principles and face extremism. Moscow, Russian and U.S. presidents will discuss Syria on October the 7th. Turkish Republican People's Party, Turkey, became state which imports terrorism. Al-Qaeda terrorists destroy statue of Harun al-Rashid Khalifa in Ar-Raqqa. Mufti, reconstruction process is everybody's responsibility. Tunisian president admits hundreds of Tunisians are traveling to fight in Syria. CBS selling $100 million to currency exchange companies next Monday. More than 40 pictures displayed at Greeting to Homeland's exhibition in Damascus. Washington Post reports on an accelerating influx of jihadis fighting in Syria. Ecuador calls for political solution to crisis in Syria. In its editorial, Thora newspaper said that from the very beginning of the crisis in Syria, Syria asserted that a Syria-led comprehensive national dialogue without reconditions is the main way to overcome the crisis. It affirmed a readiness to conduct dialogue with all national people inside and outside Syria who believe that the solution to the crisis is a national solution, far from any foreign interference or violation of the national sovereignty. The paper added that Syria has announced a readiness to participate in the international conference scheduled in Geneva and to hold a dialogue with all the political powers which believe in a peaceful political solution based on a democratic track. Syria's support for any political effort that guarantees exit from the crisis as soon as possible and guarantees the sovereignty, unity and the territorial integrity of Syria is crystal clear from the very beginning of the crisis, but the so-called opposition is still procrastinating and putting preconditions. It is preoccupied in seeking for more weapons and tools of killing and destruction to press ahead with the atrocities and sabotage acts against Syria and the public and private properties. The Daily concluded that the political track requires from the sides that openly support funded, trained and armed terrorist groups in Syria, particularly Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey, to refrain from doing so. Saudi Arabia stands towards the crisis in Syria is destructive, as it has been offering funds and weapons to armed terrorist groups over the past 2 years. Most recently, Saudi Foreign Minister announced that the UN General Assembly that his country will continue its military, political and economic support to the armed terrorist groups. Those who claim commitment to interest of the Syrian people must work hard to stop flow of weapons and terrorists into Syria.
That was a review of the Syrian local press issued in Damascus this morning. Syria and Russia discussed economic relations between the two countries and ways of bolstering them, particularly regarding exchanging commodities and cooperation in holding economic and trade fairs. The discussions were held between a Syrian economic delegation headed by Assistant Minister of Economy and Foreign Trade, Dr. Hayyan Suleiman, and a delegation of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation. The discussions also tackled Syria's accession into the Custom Union, which comprises the countries of Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, and its possible accession to the BRICS organization, which includes Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The Syrian delegation stressed the need to open a bank account in the Russian banks to facilitate the work of the Syrian and Russian businessmen, highlighting the need to attract Russian investments to Syria to participate in the fields of reconstruction and economic development. Chairman of the International and Regional Cooperation Department at the Russian Commerce and Industry Chamber, Yuri Morozov, said that the chamber and the Russian government will provide support of all the requests made by the Syrian partners. In an interview with Sana, Dr. Suleiman said that the delegation has held more than 30 meetings, adding that the meetings tackled many issues. The most important were exchanging commodities and the Syrian needs in the field of reconstruction and investments. On his part, Morozov said that the discussions were successful, welcoming Syria as a member state or observant member in many organizations such as the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Syrian community in Paris held a prayer for peace in Syria at Saint Julien-le-Pauvre Cathedral in the French capital, Paris. The participants also prayed for peace and security in the Syrian historical town of Maloula, denouncing the acts of terrorism rocking the country at the hands of Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists. Terrorists linked to Al-Qaeda overran the ancient town of Maloula and desecrated religious sanctities and historical sites there, committing appalling atrocities and disturbing the tranquility of the historical town that is an important tourist attraction. The National Union of Syrian Students in Armenia held a prayer for peace in Syria at St. Sarkis Cathedral in the Armenian capital city of Yerevan. The participants expressed standing by Syria against the foreign-backed terrorism targeting it, saluting the martyrs who fell in the line of duty. They reiterated support of the Syrian leadership in confronting the conspiracy and blasted the UN threats against Syria. The Syrian community in Canada, in cooperation with Canadian peace associations, held a demonstration in Ottawa in rejection of foreign intervention in the Syrian internal affairs. The participants expressed their support of the Syrian Arab Army in the face of the terrorist groups, hailing the sacrifices made by the Syrian soldiers to defend Syria's people and sovereignty. They voiced support of the Syrian leadership in the face of the global war waged against the country.
You are still tuned to Damascus Radio, ladies and gentlemen. Before signing off, here is our quick look at our news summary. The People's Assembly discusses citizens' needs measures to alleviate crisis impact. Media workshop recommends a strategy to enhance national principles and face extremism. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe calls for solving crisis in Syria peacefully. Moscow, Russian and U.S. presidents will discuss the crisis in Syria on October the 7th. Turkish Republican Parties or People's Party Turkey became a state which imports terrorism. Al-Qaeda terrorists destroy statue of Harun al-Rashid Khalifa in Al-Raqqa. Mufti, recommendation or reconstruction process is everybody's responsibility. Washington Post reports an accelerating influx of jihadists fighting in Syria. Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists killed in continued army operations. Army units inflict heavy losses upon terrorists in Daraa and its countryside. And army units eliminate terrorists on Homs and its countryside foil their attempts to attack Kafrena village. With this news summary, we come to the end of our English transmission for tonight from Damascus Radio. Please join us again at the same time on the same frequency. Till then, we wish you all the best and a very good night.